Hello, everybody, and welcome to my next book review, which I honestly did not expect to be a book review because I did not think anything would happen in this book worth really reviewing. But I was so wrong. I was so wrong, eating my own words. I literally even think during my September TBR, I talked about this book and I was like, oh, I'm not going to do a review for it probably unless something crazy happens. Well, something crazy happened. So here we are, and we are going to be doing a quick, no spoilers book review for From Below by Darcy Coates. Okay, I have read a few Darcy Coates before. I have read a few, and most of them are like cozy horror. I think it's Gabby Reed said that. I love that phrase. Most of them are cozy reads, cozy horror, and it's a lot of haunted house stuff and etc. Like, you never feel like in super danger of anything. You just kind of feel like a little creeped out, and you're like, oh, this is like fun to read, but I'm also not like depressed reading it. I don't know what she was going through when she wrote this one, but she ramped up the horror in this, and this, to me, this is a legitimate horror book. This is not a cozy horror. If you've seen Friends, you know the whole put a book in the freezer when it freaks you out. I legitimately thought about doing this with this book. I finished it late at night. I took my ass downstairs, put it downstairs away from where I was sleeping, and went back upstairs and went to sleep. That's how much this one freaked me out. And I don't know if it's because it has my like two major phobias in life / books / movies. They are not being able to get out of a place, like being stuck somewhere and not being able to get out and dying because you're stuck somewhere, and the Z word, which is a cuss word in this household. My husband does not say it. I do not say it because when I say it, I get nightmares. So you have being trapped because, you know, you're going underwater, and underwater Z's. If you know what I mean, good. If you don't, you just have to read it to see what I'm talking about. This follows a group of people who are going out into the unknown to explore the wreckage of the ship called the Arcadia that sunk like 100 years ago, and so far no one has seen it. So they've gotten permission and they found the ship, and they're gonna go down underwater very far to go look at the ship. They're gonna go inside the ship, etc. So it is following the group of people that are going to be doing this, and it's like following a dive instructor, a marine biologist, a tech guy, the owner of like this yacht. Like, this guy is obsessed with shipwrecks, so he offered his yacht if he can like come and look at the footage before it's like in the documentary. So him, and then a camera guy, and our main like kind of lead, who is like the face of stuff, and she's climbed Everest and done all this crazy stuff. So they're coming together to go down to this wreck. So once they make it actually into the ship, you notice some really weird things happening. And it turns out that one of the reasons they didn't find the ship originally is that it had some really, really, really weird mayday calls. And the ship was found 300 miles away from where it should have been. So they're trying to figure out why it was 300 miles away from where it should have been, what's up with the mayday calls, what exactly happened on the ship. And when they get inside, some very, very strange things they can tell have occurred before the sinking of the ship. So this book does a lot of things really well. We're going to talk about what I liked about this book, maybe what I would have changed, because I gave it a 4-star. We'll talk about things that I maybe would have changed, and then who I think this book is for, and that's what we're going to leave it at. I'm not going to talk about spoilers, because this is definitely a book to me that's like, you need to go in not knowing much, and just because it's a sense of dread. Like, it is definitely the setting and what's going on and the slow sense of dread that leads up to this like crazy stuff happening at the end. So the things that I loved about this book were, number one, the writing. Darcy Coates, I love her writing. She is great at writing characters. She is great at writing setting. She is great at making you feel like you are involved in the story, and you know the people, and you know what's going on, and you're there. So I absolutely love the writing. And going along with that, I love the setting, even though it makes me so uncomfortable. It makes me so uncomfortable. So they are deep enough that it's considered deep diving. And in this situation, to decompress, as I'm sure as everyone knows, if you're diving and you want to come up to the surface, you have to decompress. It's pretty much the opposite of like high altitude mountain climbing. And high altitude mountain climbing, on the way up, you have to get used to the climate and you have to make stops over days. But then you can rush down the mountain and it automatically makes you feel better. This is the opposite. This, you go right down, but on the way up, you have to make sometimes like hour-long, like it can take 2 hours to come back up to the surface depending on how long you're down there. So in this one, it's like a 2-hour ascent. So they have to conserve their oxygen, make sure that they're watching, they're like monitors watching how quickly their heart's beating, and they're following this dive instructor who's telling them like, hey, how we're doing this, we're doing it the safest way possible. You have a third of your oxygen to get down and explore, and a third of your oxygen to get back up, and a third of your oxygen for emergency purposes. If something happens, you get stuck somewhere, etc. So I've already got anxiety because of this. Like, if you're dying down and stuck somewhere, you can't just come up to the surface or you'll still die. Like, I'm still gonna try and go to the surface, obviously, but like, oh, so you are stuck. It has already given you the feeling of like, okay, well, while we're down here, we are stuck down here. There's nothing we can do. We're helpless. Oh, I hate that feeling. So great setting, great location being underwater. Love it. Love the setup. The setup is really, really, really good. There's chapters in this that happen on the Arcadia 6 days advance, and it like winds down of the crash, and it is horrible. It is horrifying. So you're like, it's 2 people that you're kind of in the mindset of following, and it's stuff that they're seeing and stuff that they're hearing and their sense of dread as you go on, and I'm just like, it was a lot. It was a lot. And then you'll go back to the present and they're seeing some of the same stuff that not the soldiers, but the sailors were seeing. And it's just, oh, the setup is so good. And I like how the creeping sense of dread, because they make like 3 dives. They need 3 dives to get all the footage that they need or they won't get paid. And every dive gets worse. So you know it's gonna get worse, and you're just like, oh gosh, what's about to happen? So you just feel this ultimate sense of dread and like you're just waiting for bad stuff to happen. For me, is amazing setting, amazing feeling, fantastic. The characters are really good. Not a single character is the same. Every single character has got a very, very unique personality, which is impressive for, I think it's like 6 characters or something in this book. And it is a long book. It's like 460 pages. But to give each character a full personality and story and understanding them and kind of being able to guess what they're going to do in situations, that's impressive. I like that. I think the horror was done very well in this book. Like I said, creeping sense of dread, but towards the end you get like legitimate in-your-face horror, and it freaked me out. A few times I had to stop reading because I was so tense and freaked out and grossed out and just uncomfortable. She does a really good job of making you feel very uncomfortable in the horror sections. Like, if you look away from the book, something bad's gonna happen to you too. Like, it made me so uncomfortable. So the things that I thought she could do a little bit better, I do think it was a little too long. I really like the development, but I think a few of the sections that happened in the past could have been cut out. Like, they spend a lot of time on day 6. Like I said, they count down. So on day 6 6 days before the crash, they spend a lot of time on day 6. So I don't think it was entirely necessary to have that many days spent. And then there is definitely some stuff like in the past that could have been cut out. Like, I understood what was going on, and I feel like she really wanted to drill it in your head what was going on, and it wasn't as necessary. And then there's some moments where in between dives they're talking on the boat for a really long time, and I really didn't think that was wholly necessary as well. It was interesting, and it was, I feel like, important for the dynamic between the crew, but at sometimes you just felt like, okay, let's get rolling, let's get information, let's do something. So it can be a little slow at times, but it more than makes up for it with the action sequences and what's going on otherwise. And of course, it's a horror book. You have people making poor decisions. I swear, some of this book felt like, do you know that commercial where there's a chainsaw massacre guy and he's stalking kids and the kids are like, let's run to the car that's working. No, we can't do that. Let's run to the chainsaws and thing. And they go hide in the dumbest place possible. That's kind of what this felt a few times. Like characters legitimately making super dumb decisions. But at the same time, you wouldn't have a book if they weren't making dumb decisions. I feel like it's a lot of horror books. A lot of horror books are like, if you just noped out of there, they would have been like 10 minutes, you're done and you're alive, go home. So this is kind of what that felt like, but it doesn't bother me that much. I just kind of sitting there going, you idiots, you idiots. That's pretty much it that I didn't like about this. It was really good. I definitely got what I asked for, probably a little too much. I was a little too freaked out reading this. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. Wasn't expecting to be that freaked out, especially when I read the scariest parts literally in the middle of the night, like by myself at the house. It was not a good idea. It was not a good idea, but it was a fun experience. I highly recommend this for Halloween if you want a claustrophobic read. That's gonna leave you a little freaked out. The people that I think should read this are people who are, I'm trying to think about this because horror has a very interesting fan base. I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this, but horror's got a lot of snobby fans. Like, I'm sorry, like they treat it kind of like an exclusive club. I'm sorry for saying that, but horror is for everybody. I'm just saying that horror is for everybody. To me, this is not for hardcore horror fans. I don't think they're gonna like it. I think they're gonna be like, oh, this isn't actually that scary. So if you're into hardcore horror and you're thinking about picking this up, I think you should, but I don't know if you're gonna enjoy it. I don't think it's got the blood and guts that you're probably looking for, the really, really extreme horror where there's like tons of death and chaos, and I mean, it doesn't have any of that. It doesn't have that kind of stuff going on. This is more creeping sense of dread, uncomfortable. I definitely think this is scarier than a lot of horror books I've actually read, but I don't know if it's because of my like specific fears, like super specific fears. Like I've read plenty of horror and I've never wanted to put one in the freaking freezer. This is the only one. So I think this is for people who want a horror reading experience without the extremeness of it that you get with a lot of like real horror. So I think this is a really good one for beginner horror or people who just enjoy horror as a genre and like to consume all sorts of different horror media. So that's kind of who I would say this for. If you're super into horror, I'd stay away from it because I just don't think you're gonna, I think you're gonna think this is like an attempt at horror. That's just kind of my 2 cents. I'm probably gonna get yelled at by some horror fans, but you know what? It's fine. I really, really enjoyed this book. 4 stars, freaked me out, very much enjoyed it, and I hope you guys pick this up and enjoy it as well. That is my book review, and I will see you guys in the next one.